Right now, Jenny, over to you to talk about your novels, Mill Grange. Well, in fact, before you do that, tell everybody about your writing generally, because you are a couple of people and you write across different genres and in different ways, don't you? So maybe first introduce yourself with a little summary of what you do, and we'll go.
I will indeed. Thank you very much, Mark, and also to Crediton Library for hosting today. Do support them as we go along through the day, because they work very hard to get this literary festival together. I've organised literary festivals myself in the past, and I'm here to tell you it is not an easy job to do. So as Mark kindly said, yes, I am Jenny Kane, and I write rom-coms. In fact, I've been writing for the last 16 years now, and only for the last 7 of those have I been Jenny Kane, writer of rom-coms and contemporary fiction. I'm also Jennifer Ash, who writes historical crime set in the medieval period, as well as audio scripts for ITV's 1980s series Robin of Sherwood, and a few other scripts as well, actually, which I am not yet at liberty to tell you about. I also have several other pen names, which we won't go into now, but if you want details about them, you can certainly find them online. And as we go through the talk today, I will be giving you links to my website and indeed those elusive Mars bar scones. Okay, so we'll dive in. As Mark said, I've been writing for some time now, and it's very interesting when you write. There are so many things to consider, and one of the most important of all is location. And without exception, for all of the contemporary fiction stories I have written, I have chosen to use my own locational experiences to draw upon for those books in question. Because not only does this mean that you can cut down on the amount of research you do, it means you can get the feel of a place over more accurately, because you already know personally how the air feels on your face in that place. You know the senses involved, you know the sights and the sounds and the smells, whether it's something as simple as the sound of a coffee grinder in the background of your local cafe, whether it's the scent of oil coming off the North Sea. These little things make quite an impact on the page as you write. So this being said, when I wrote my Cornish books, A Cornish Escape and A Cornish Wedding, I deliberately placed them in the Selwyn Cove, Penzance area of Cornwall, because I know it really well. My father grew up in Penzance, and so I spent every single summer holiday right up until the age of 16 in that area of Cornwall, and so I knew it very well. The same applies to my Romancing Robin Hood novel, which is half set in Leicester, half set in Nottingham, and it revolves around the 2 universities there. And the same applies. I was a student at Leicester University, and then I was a student for a short time at Nottingham University. I got to know the locations very well, down to quite a minute level, and it makes it very much easier as a writer if you know the location very well. When it came to the Mill Grange books, however, it was a slightly different story, because whereas before I'd thought about places that I knew, such as Cornwall or Leicester or Nottingham, and thought how I could use those places to develop a novel, this time I was inspired to write the Mill Grange by a place itself, somewhere I had previously never been to before. It was one specific house in one of my favourite places in the world, which is Exmoor, that sparked the seed for these stories. And that was this rather wonderful looking place here, Northmoor House. It really is as stunning as it looks. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the picture doesn't really do the place justice. It's situated near the village of Dulverton, which is just over the Devon border into Somerset. And as soon as I saw it, I knew I had to write something that included this place. I was only there, in fact, because I was looking with my business partner, Alison Knight, for a retreat location. We both teach creative writing, and we wanted to set up some sort of writing retreat so people could go and have peace and quiet once or twice a year to write their novels. And the second we drove up the drive and parked in front of the house, we knew we'd found our location. It's a Victorian manor, and it was built in 1856 on the orders of a guy called John Arthur Locke. He was a lead manufacturer from Newcastle upon Tyne, and he wanted somewhere peaceful and far from the industrial world for his family to stay sometimes. And as you can see, he really put his heart into it. It's gone through various ownerships since then, and it's now owned by the Nicholson family, who are local to the Dulverton area. It really is impressive. Not only is it the large 14-bedroom house that you see there, it has beautiful original Victorian bathrooms, complete with the original sort of tubs on the little tiny feet, which are very, very comfortable to have a bath in. It has an impressive garden. It has an additional walled garden, and it has a beautiful fairy tale style wood that, if you walk through it, takes you as far as the River Barle and beyond to the Tar Steps with its wonderful prehistoric Clapper Bridge right at the bottom. It is a total mishmash of a place inside. It has the original wallpaper. It has an eclectic array of artwork. The furniture is from all historical periods. And I know it sounds rather airy-fairy to say it, but the place exudes happiness. There's a sense of contentment about it that wraps you up when you go inside. And it was this feeling, as well as the fact that I just immediately liked the place, that told me that the idea that I'd had the minute I walked into the house for a story that had to be set there would work. That feeling of contentment. And I decided that I wanted to use as much about the house and its surrounding as possible, including the chickens. In the walled garden, there are a lovely group of chickens. There's a little picture that I took of them last year. And very quickly, I was surprised to find that the chickens have become almost amongst the favourite characters in the book. It's particularly Gertrude, who is chief hen, if you like. She is the head of the pecking order. And the residents of Mill Grange, as it became, really use Gertrude as their sounding board. All problems are taken to the wisdom of the chickens. They even have a rooster who looks after them, and because of the way the rooster walks at the original Northmoor, which reminded me very much of the manner in which Robert Downey Jr. walks, I decided to call the rooster in the books Tony Stark, something which has also amused quite a few of my readers. I digress. So I saw Northmoor for the first time. Having had a quick look round, Alison and I decided we would sit and think about whether we were going to use this place as a retreat. We didn't have to think long, as you can imagine. But as I sat there, I was more preoccupied with the idea for this story which had landed in my head. And I got out a pad, and there on a picnic table outside Northmoor's kitchen, I began to sketch an idea for a story. At the time, of course, I expected it to be a standalone book. I soon realised, however, once I actually started writing, that there were far more stories across the threshold of Mill Grange, and so it has become a series of 4, 3 out, 1 to come. Why then did I decide to change the name of the house? Well, I wanted the freedom to be able to change aspects of the property if I needed to for fictional purposes. As it happens, I haven't really had to do that. I thought maybe I'd have to put in more bedrooms, move where the scullery was, just change the layout of the kitchen, just so the characters could move around the house in the manner I needed them to. But this didn't actually happen. What I did end up doing was change part of the garden. But I'm not actually going to tell you how I've changed part of the garden, because that would be a massive spoiler and a real shame if you haven't read any of the books yet. My aim was to make Mill Grange House as much of a character in the books as the humans. And it is Mill Grange that brings the main characters, Thea Thomas, Sean Colson, Tina Martin, Sam Phillips, and the formidable and feisty pensioners, Bert and Mabel Hastings, together. The house really does unite people. Again, I'm not going to tell you precisely how, because I would hate to spoil the story for you, but the restoration of the house and the open day that follows are very much part of that process. Now, Mill Grange is set in Upwich, and this is almost identical to the real village of Dulverton, where Northmoor sort of butts up to, if you like. Again, I changed the name of the village so that I could play fast and loose with the layout of the place. And I have changed a few things in this instance. The mill, rather than being on the far side of Dulverton, I have moved, and it's only about 1/4 of a mile from the Upwich, Mill Grange location, because I wanted the mill to be closer to the house, hence calling it Mill Grange. I have, however, used the pub and just simply changed the name to the Stag and Hound. And the tea rooms, rather than being the Copper Kettle, is in my book, Sybil's Tea Rooms. But if you've read the stories and you stand in Dulverton, you can very easily recognise the place as Upwich that you stand amongst. Now, Mark kindly mentioned at the beginning that scones are quite important to this story. In fact, I have, as he said, posted the famous Mars bar scone recipe. And there is a really good reason for this. Scone consumption is very important in Mill Grange, and I'll come to why in a moment. But scones have a very, very important place in my heart. I've always enjoyed eating a scone. Who doesn't, and why not? However, they are important to me for a very specific reason. Back in 2005, I was sat in a coffee shop in Aberdeenshire where I lived at the time. My 2 youngest children had gone to school, and I was alone for the very first time in 5 years. And an idea for a story came to me in that place whilst eating a Mars bar scone. I had never written before. I wrote the story down. I sent it to a publisher a little while later, and miraculously, and it was a miracle, pure fluke, it was taken. I swear that Mars bar scone had inspirational properties. Are they as good as they sound? Are they as good as they look? No, they are much, much better than that. And if you are curious and you do want to try, and I promise they're incredibly easy to make, then you can find them on my website today at jennykane.co.uk. I will put the link on the Crediton Literary Festival site for you later on. Scones, of course, come in all flavours. I've had pizza scones, I've had lemon and coconut scones, I've had Malteser scones, cherry scones. There's very little that you can't put in a scone scenario. And, you know, why wouldn't you experiment? They're lovely things. Having said that, it is cheese scones that Sybil's Tea Rooms is known for, okay? Cheese scones, very important. And it makes me think that I am right to be accused of making people crave scones. Some of the reviews I've had for Mill Grange have complained, in inverted commas, that whilst reading, people have had to stop and go and buy or make cheese scones. And in fact, this is a familiar complaint to me, because when I was writing the Another Cup of Coffee series several years ago now, I had similar reviews saying that whilst people were reading my work, they developed a caffeine craving, which upped their coffee intake tenfold. So be aware whilst you are reading my books that you might start craving serious calories. When it comes to writing, location really is very, very important. But what is location? So location to a writer is anything from a world setting to a city, a town, right down to the level of a shoe cupboard. Location is any place that moves the plot forward. It is somewhere where something happens. But of course, there's much more to it than that. But because a location won't work unless it has good atmosphere. And you apply atmosphere by adding senses, by adding tension. And more important of all, placing the emotions and connections of your characters on that place. Location and emotion are intrinsically linked, because we are unable as human beings to see a place without imprinting our thoughts, our hopes, our aims, our dreams, our preconceptions on that place. If you think about it, if you see a place as a child and you go back to it as an adult, it will be the same, but it will feel different. There might be somewhere that you've always wanted to see, and when you get there, you are subject to your preconceptions, your hopes. Are you disappointed? Does it exceed expectations? And the same is can be said for familiar locations. We don't like it when places we like are changed. We react when places that have previously felt safe suddenly feel unsafe. Even down to the coffee shop. If you go into the coffee shop and you expect it to be peaceful, but it's not, you can feel disappointed. Our reactions, our emotions impact all the time on location. And because that's how we think as human beings, it's how our characters must also think. We must show through location how people are reacting all the time. Location is every bit as important as character, and they are permanently intertwined. This being the case, you should never ever put a location in the book that isn't there for a reason. Location, like everything else, has to be there to move the plot forward. That being said, location should always be chosen with great care. And if you don't know a place that you're putting in your book, do your research very carefully. Look, Google and books can go so far, but if you can go there, then definitely go there. There are places, therefore, within the Mill Grange book, which obviously go beyond Mill Grange and Upwich, but they need to be there to move the plot along. And two of those places are Bodmin Moor in Cornwall, which you can see in the top picture, and the Cotswolds. The reason that I have chosen those two places is that they are both rich in archaeological history. Bodmin Moor is very important in book 2, Autumn Leaves at Mill Grange, and the Cotswolds is really important in book 3, Spring Blossoms at Mill Grange. The first character we meet in the first book, this one, Midsummer Dreams at Mill Grange, is Thea Thomas. And when we meet her, Thea Thomas is working at the Roman Baths in Bath, somewhere where I also happen to know quite well, because a long, long time ago, I used to help take school trips around the baths. When we meet her, she's quite ready. Let's just say she's in a rut, shall we? And she is ready to move on. I have given Thea the same archaeological experiences that I had, because once upon a time, also a long time ago, I was an archaeologist and historian, just as she was. And so I have shared with her my archaeological experiences. Now, if you look at that top slide, that is an olive grove in Tunisia, and it is on the outskirts of the Lepti Major Romano-African city, which I was privileged to be part of the excavation team of, all back when I was 19 years old, so frighteningly long time ago. And I walked those olive groves as a field walker for many, many hours in the blistering heat. And the Roman remains were literally scattered everywhere. It was a matter of child's play, picking up mosaic tesserae, pottery shards, and so on and so forth. I was also privileged enough while I was there to help excavate the Roman baths and the Roman mausoleum. Forgive me for not sharing slides, but I'm obviously only sharing pictures that I have copyright for. The archaeological scene you can see there is from Caerwent in Wales. And again, I was very fortunate to be part of the archaeological team that worked on the Roman city of Caerwent in Wales for many, many years. That isn't part of the dig that I formed because obviously, again, copyright reasons, but it is very similar to the work I was doing. And as it happens, I was the very first trowel to touch the Roman Forum at Caerwent many years ago. And I have to tell you, it was quite a feeling. I mean, it was pure fluke that I happened to hit the stone first, but I did. And so I was the first person to uncover the Roman Forum in over 1,000 years. And it's not a feeling I will ever forget. The bottom picture there was from my very first archaeological dig, which was on Lindisfarne, on the northeast coast of Britain. And there I was part of a team uncovering an Anglo-Saxon farmstead called Greenshill. The thing with the Anglo-Saxons is that they were largely aceramic, which means there was no pottery. Everything was made of wood. which makes remains very difficult to find. So although we did find shadows in the ground showing where post holes and buildings had been, in terms of actual artifacts, there was very little going. And I think it was possibly in fact it was my most disappointing dig find wise. We found very, very little. I did, however, learn how cold the North Sea is, even in the middle of a blistering hot July. I also learnt that there are an awful lot of shells at the seaside. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But when you are picking up each and every one and sifting sand all day, you just realise that a lot is actually thousands and thousands and thousands. Anyway, I digress. So Thea Thomas has taken on my own archaeological experiences, and they are occasionally drip fed into the novel. So, as I said, when we first meet Thea, she's keen to escape her life at the Roman Baths in Bath. Don't get me wrong, she's not unhappy with the job, but there are other things going on. And I will just read you the blurb from the book to give you a flavour of the story's background. Thea Thomas needs to get away from her old life and the interfering ex who won't leave her alone. When she lands a job heading up the restoration of Mill Grange, a stunning Victorian manor in Somerset, it feels like the perfect opportunity to start fresh. What she didn't anticipate was just how hostile the volunteer team, led by the formidable Mabel Hastings, would be to accept new leadership. And with the deadline looming before the grand opening, Thea is in desperate need of more volunteers. A broadcast appeal on the local news attracts the interest of troublesome but undeniably attractive historian Sean Colson, who wants to make a television programme about the restoration. It's hard enough adding one more big personality to the mix, but then her ex turns up as one of the volunteers. What seemed like a dream come true is fast becoming a total disaster. Can Thea find a way to save the manor? Okay, so as you all heard from that blurb, Thea isn't the only archaeologist in the Mill Grange mix. For Sean Colson, celebrity archaeologist, pops up to help restore the manor. I decided to make him the head presenter of a show which I made up called Landscape Treasures, which I have to confess bears more than a passing resemblance to a certain show which you will probably all remember called Time Team. I used to absolutely love Time Team, and I eagerly await the new revamped Time Team that hopefully should be coming quite soon now. I loved Time Team, as I said, and it was thanks to that show that I followed my dream to become an archaeologist. When I was just 14 years old, I was extremely fortunate to meet Phil Harding, him of the hat there, if you haven't seen the show. I was about to start GCSE archaeology at my school, which was rare then and is even rarer now. Phil had come to the school to show us how to flint knap, and in fact it seems incredible now, health and safety would never allow it these days, but we were all allowed to have a go. So he was teaching us to knap axes, so we all sat around in a big circle with our safety goggles on, no gloves, cut my hands to pieces. Anyway, afterwards Phil had obviously noticed that I wanted to say something, but I was a very shy child and I just didn't have the guts to put my hand up. Took me to one side and he said, "You want to be an archaeologist, don't you?" And I said, "Well, yes." And he said, "If you want to be an archaeologist, you're halfway there. All you have to do is study hard, learn how to drink pints of beer and how to hold your bladder for 24 hours. Well, I managed part one. I definitely studied hard and I ended up doing archaeology at university. Beer, holding my bladder, still can't do it. Once I was an archaeology student, I was fortunate again to meet Mick Aston, who you can see that in the bright blue t-shirt and glasses at the opposite end of the picture. An extremely lovely man, very sadly missed. He taught me many things about the Saxons, which was his speciality, in many a lecture. Then fast forward several years to when I did my PhD on medieval history. To my surprise and still amazed that this happened, my PhD on medieval criminology was used by Tony Robinson, Time Team's presenter, as part of the research for a documentary that he did on Robin Hood. but my connection with Robin Hood is very much another story. It seemed logical, therefore, that if I was going to have any sort of television celebrity in my books, they would be an archaeologist, as a deferential nod to a show that helped shape my life. It also gave me the opportunity to play with how the other characters in the book would cope with somebody who was a celebrity, even though I must stress that Sean absolutely hates the celebrity side of things and does avoid the limelight at all costs. As you'll have gathered from listening to me speak, I very much take the write what you know to heart. And there's a reason for this. If you can use your own experiences, you can get the emotion, the drama, the tension, the phobias, the fears of your experiences across in your work. They're a strong starting place. Now, by the time you have written, rewritten, redrafted, edited 7 times, hated it, gone back, rewritten it, and edited it again, the finished result is usually a million miles from anything that actually happened. But by using your experiences for that first initial draft, you have a nice, solid base with which to work from, and you are left with something relatable to your audience because you have been there. If it feels real to you, it will feel real to other people. And the reason it feels real to you is that it was. Now, talking of things that I do, I love to walk. And it won't surprise you that I love to walk on Exmoor. Whenever I'm not writing, which isn't very often, I do tend to write 24/7. Not writing, I am walking. I absolutely love to walk, which, considering the amount of scones I eat, is probably just as well. And when we do walk, my husband and I like to walk on Exmoor most of all. And again, I have been rather indulgent with the Mill Grange books, and I have given the characters within those stories the love of the same places that we have. We love to walk the tar steps, which you can find, as I said, at the bottom of Northmoor, and therefore near Mill Grange, at Exford, at Winsford, and most of all at Haddon Hill. And these pictures here are of Haddon Hill. You can see the Exmoor ponies there, you can see the trig point. And it is such a beautiful, stunning place. The scenery changes whichever direction you look. Whatever time of year, whatever the weather, there is always something new to see. It has a perfect peace about the place. And even when it's busy, it never feels busy. It always feels personal and that you could be the only one in the entire world there. In other words, it's a great escape from the realities of the day. Now, writing a book is really hard work. It's wonderful, but it's really hard work. So if you can make it easier for yourself by basing your work around places that you love, using your own passions, your own memories, your own hopes and your own dreams, and giving them to characters that you love, the experience is so much nicer. And with the Mill Grange series, Midsummer Dreams, Autumn Leaves, Spring Blossoms, which comes out in paper, I have the paperback here, but this doesn't actually come out until next Thursday. You can buy it on Kindle now, but you don't get this lovely big thick paperback until next Thursday. I did just that. In November, the 4th and final book in the series, Winter Fires at Mill Grange, gives you a book for every season. Combining my love of archaeology, of walking, of the countryside, of Northmoor House, and indeed of scones together, has meant that Mill Grange is probably my favourite set of rom-coms to write so far. I say so far because a couple of weeks ago I started work on a brand new series of romantic comedies. This time there will be no Northmoor. It's unlikely that I'll mention scones, but I promise you there will be a healthy dose of Exmoor. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenny. I guarantee that there will be scones at some point in your future, despite what you say. I don't think.
Well, I'm gonna try hard not to. You know, we don't want to be typecast for sconage, but I think we can definitely guarantee cups of coffee, can't we?
We absolutely can. For those that don't realise why there is a giant coffee bean over Jenny's shoulder, that is because Jenny is writer in residence in the Tiverton branch of Costa. Other coffee shops are available.
I'm really sorry. It's not a deliberate advert. It's just the best Wi-Fi spot.
It's absolutely fine. And of course, being an author, Jenny is, as we all are, fueled by coffee as well. So that all makes perfect sense. If you have any questions for Jenny, as a couple already have, please do pop them in the chat. I'm going to ask you one first, though. Whilst I give people a chance to do that. You've discussed some of the many books that you've published in your time, aside from which you also teach writing courses and do a myriad of other things as well. How easy or difficult do you find it as a writer to focus on the plot of a book when you write so many words a day and then do something else with your time and then do something else with your time and then come back to the book again tomorrow and do another couple of thousand words?
It's an excellent question, actually. I cope by compartmentalizing my day. I start writing at 7 o'clock in the morning, and that is my major writing time. I'll write until about 11:30, and that's when I am Jenny or Jennifer, the writer, depending on whether it's a script or a novel that I am primarily working on that particular week. And I don't find it difficult to focus, because on the walk into the cafe every morning, it's almost like going into the role, because of course this is what it is. I mean, Jenny Kane is not my real name, it is the persona. So I leave me at home and I become her, and it helps me focus on what I have to do that day, whether I'm being Jenny Kane or Jennifer Ash. And then after 11:30, I become Jenny Kane, the writing tutor. And I will either be writing workshops or helping my many students or editing their work until about 2 o'clock, and when I go back to my secondary writing role of the day. So if it's novel in the morning, then it's likely to be script in the afternoon. If it's script in the morning, it's likely to be novel in the afternoon, depending on whose deadline is winning. Yeah, it's a case of just making sure I have a very strict routine, and luckily I'm very, very disciplined, and I am a really scary boss. I'd hate to work for me, and I'm very unforgiving of myself if I don't stick to my plan. But I work a very long day, as most writers do, especially people like ourselves, Mark, that juggle other jobs as well. And it's very rare I work less than 12 hours a day.
There are many of us, as you say, in a similar position, and yes, it's hard work, isn't it? And it is difficult sometimes to focus mind, but it needs to be done. We'll move over to have a look at some other people's questions. Just a reminder that, of course, if you enjoy the books of any of the writers that we listened to today, Victoria before this one, Jenny's books on screen there, and there are others and more to come, you can, of course, borrow them from us at the library, because they are all available. And in fact, we had a lovely display of books for this literary festival, but they all disappeared really quickly. So people have been doing that, which is great. They are all gradually coming back now and can be borrowed again. Or of course, you can buy them on many popular websites, or from an independent bookshop, which is always our recommended route for buying print copies, or you can get them on electronic devices. The possibilities are endless. There's a link to Jenny's website in the chat, which I posted earlier on, if you want to have a look at her books, or indeed her scones. Jenny mentioned earlier as well about the script writing for Robin of Sherwood, and how that is a completely different story, but not one you're going to get away with, because there is a question from Catherine in the chat that says, when writing the Robin of Sherwood audio plays and books, were you able to visit any of the filming locations as inspiration?
Well, bless you. That's an excellent question. I didn't actually have to, because I grew up within a whisper of Bradford-on-Avon, where a lot of it was filmed. So again, locationally, I felt lucky. I know those places from childhood like the back of my hand, whether it's Laycott, Bradford and Avon, Cheddar Gorge, near where they filmed the Swords of Wayland. So no, I didn't have to. What I tended to do was play Clannad on loop in the background, who provided the fantastic score for the show, of course. And I have to confess, though I did rewatch the series, I didn't really need to, because I could quote you the entire plot without having to actually look. I mean, I could, you know, Adam Bell, I could just tell you the whole script now without looking at a television screen. That's how sad I am.
Yes, it's often the case with things that you love that people can do that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife, who's sitting not a million miles from me on the other side of the room, do exactly the same thing.
Nodding.
Other things as well. But we're not talking about aliens today. Victoria.
Thanks, Tracy.
Victoria has just noted that she particularly likes the archaeological angle, which is great because, of course, Kate Ellis coming up after Jenny will also be covering archaeology and writing as well with her books, of course. Did you have to do a lot of research for the archaeological side? Asks Victoria. Obviously, it is in your background, but what does your research look like?
Well, no, because I confess I'm coming across as a very lazy writer here, but I didn't, because I did everything that's mentioned. Everything that happens archaeologically wise, I did or have experience of. There is one dig involved, which I'm not going to go into details because it would spoil things, where, yes, I did have to look into the archaeology of Exmoor quite closely, because that is one place where I haven't worked on site myself. So I did quite a lot of research into the Roman archaeology or lack thereof on Exmoor. And I learned quite a lot. That was very interesting. It was nice to learn something new. But beyond the actual Mill Grange or Northmoor location, then everything else came from first-hand experience. So the research I did do was me looking through my university dissertation and checking that I'd got my own facts right, to be honest.
There's a question from Michelle, just to round off the chat questions, unless anybody else posts one. Michelle's coming to Northmoor in March next year on one of the writing courses that you run there. And Michelle wants to know, is it as inspirational for writing dark thrillers as it is for writing romantic comedies?
It absolutely is, and I can give you a fabulous example. A wonderful lady who comes along to our Northmoor regularly, to our Northmoor retreat, is Morwenna Blackwood, and she wrote her very first novel, a very dark thriller called The Devolution of Us, entirely at Northmoor in two stages, and then she edited it here in this very cafe where I sit now. And it's doing frightfully well on with Darkstroke Publishers. So yes, I can not only say yes, but I can back it up with published evidence.
There you go, Michelle. No problems. We should expect to be talking to you about a dark thriller in due course once you've been to Northmoor. and
when there's a power cut, then really, it definitely inspiration for the thrillers.
Yes, yeah, I'm having been to Northmoor myself. I can exactly see that's the case. Let me round this off by asking you one other question that came to my mind while we were talking about. You spoke earlier on about Northmoor or Mill Grange in your books being very much a character, or you want the building to be a character as much as the other players in the story are characters. There are other books, aren't there, very well-known books where we can think about that in the same way. The Haunting of Hill House, the house itself is a really major character. Sarah Waters' The Little Stranger, obviously the house in that has a central role. How easy or difficult is it to characterize a building alongside people in that way so that it resonates that strongly in a story?
It's very difficult, to be honest. It's much harder than characterizing people, because obviously human beings have automatically recognizable, relatable features, because you have emotion to play with, whereas a building is a building, and you can only resonate feelings if you add in, shall we call them, relatable points. So you need to be very careful with the relaying of the sense that a place gives off. So as I said at the beginning of the talk, Northmoor House itself has a very calm, happy feel to it. It really does resonate contentment, and I really wanted to get that across, but that's quite difficult on a flat piece of paper. So I would say that was the hardest thing I did. I am told by my publisher that I pulled that off, but you will have to make your own decision on that, obviously. But yeah, you're right. I mean, even if you haven't read the books, places say like Sherlock Holmes, Baker Street, 221 Baker Street, it's a character, isn't it? You can sort of feel the place even if you've never read the book, and that was the sort of angle I was hoping to achieve.
Good. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and be a part of today's events and to talk about your writing. It's been wonderful to have you.